welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Lisa M. Gunshore is a tantric yogini, certified quantum coach and functional Ayurveda wellness coach with initiations by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Lisa is also a medium and shaman and a certified yoga instructor. If that's not enough, she's a psychic medium. She has a culinary background, and she's had several near-death experiences. She's a blogger. She has a podcast, The Buddhist Biohacker, and a YouTube channel by the same name. She's the author of Enlightenment Pie, and a second edition is coming soon, so we'll hear more about that a little later. You can learn more about Lisa M. Gunshore at her website, which is BuddhistBiohacker.com. This is Lisa's second appearance on the Big Seance. Her first visit was 3 years ago, this month actually, in episode 176. We talked about 1111D, which I'm not going to lie, still makes my eyes cross and it goes over my head. We talked a little bit about her book, Enlightenment Pie. We talked about food sensitivities, about the terrifying, life-changing car accident that led to an NDE, and we talked about spirit photos. And I've also been on Lisa's show where we've nerded out about Halloween and paranormal investigation and paranormal TV. So there's a lot to catch up on if you're new to Lisa and her work. So check those show notes at BigSeance.com, and I'll throw as many of those links and things that I can find in there. So welcome back to the Parlor, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor to be here on your show.
We always can sit here and just bounce back joy and humor and laughing. I mean, I'm sorry that the audience missed out, but we've just been gabbing for 34 minutes before hitting record. So
it's so true.
So, Lisa, as we know, a lot can change in 3 years. And in the last 3 years, a lot of us always talk about this weird phenomenon that has happened where it seems like yesterday, but at the same time, it seems like 17 years ago. So especially, when it's these past particular 3 years, a lot has changed for all of us. But what have you been up to since 2020?
Oh my gosh. That's
loaded question.
I know. Since 2020. I have recorded over 1,200 videos since March of 2020. Isn't that crazy?
Crazy.
Buddhist Biohacker birthed March of 2020. That was when I had created the YouTube channel, like the handle, in November of 2019. Not really sure what I'd do with it. And then March, of course, hit. And so a lot has happened. So I've actually been on a hiatus for the last year. I actually closed up shop October of 2022. And a big part of that was I really look at the last few years as it was kind of like a laboratory. I built a mobile app, had a community in there, had my show, my podcast, had things I'd written, my first edition of my book. And I think over the last few years, the evolution of myself, my community, and my work, I got very clear last year about where I wanted to go with my work. And one of the biggest things I needed to do was revise my book to kind of put clarity around my process and what I was doing. One of the other things I did is I did a year-long certification to become a quantum coach. which is a really cool program that really is about moving out of the drama triangle, which is the victim, savior, persecutor, and moving into the empowerment dynamic. And for me, that was pretty life-changing because as a psychic medium, I think a lot of my work was that savior role, right? Giving information, healing, helping people through things. And I really want to empower everyone rather than saving everyone. And so that's what I've been up to. I mean, really this last year, I was revising my book and, doing some of my own personal work on myself. Like, what do I want to change within myself? And how do I want to, co-create with my clients, with my community, and come into a different space. So there's been a lot to think about. And I think, we talked about it a little bit, but I think the last couple of years has really presented, as we move into the age of Aquarius, it's the fall of the guru. So this is why you can become an influencer, on social media, because you don't need somebody to kind of put you on a pedestal. You can do it yourself. And that's what the age of Aquarius is about. It's about removing kind of that elite status, and everyone has elite status. It's like inverting that pyramid. And I think that's really great. And I think a lot of us have seen our teachers fall, and that's a lot to process. And also, all of us who are teachers, how do we hold a space where we're all equal and connected and supporting one another rather than having it be like a leader of something? And so I think quantum coaching for me was really life-changing, and that was 2021. And so 2022 was kind of me closing everything down so that I could rebuild it on a new foundation, on a healthy foundation. And now 2023 has been, refining that new foundation. And now here I am, October 2023, and I'm ready to open back up. I've opened my community back up, and it's very focused on home study and learning and, being able to heal yourself. And so a lot of self-healing, natural healing. It's not about a single person or a single piece of information. It's also a lot of psychic development, spiritual development, learning meditation, learning how to develop your gifts yourself. So that's really where I'm at today.
But it's safe to say that the biggest bulk of all of your content has happened since the last time we heard your voice on this show. So that's a lot. And everybody, I feel, in the last 3 years has continued to grow in their thoughts and beliefs. And I heard you in one of your videos talk about how you felt bad for saying it, but that you really needed something like, and I'm definitely not wanting to put words in your mouth, but you definitely needed that March of 2020 to slow you down and to put you in a place where you could kind of take care of yourself or something like that. And I have always kind of felt that myself too. Like, I was not one of those people that like, oh my God, being on lockdown was the most horrible experience ever. I felt guilty for enjoying it and liking it, and it has helped me take another look at what life is supposed to be. And we've had this kind of great resignation, which I'm kind of part of, although it's like legit retirement. But when you reevaluate what you want life to be, I think the pandemic was a part of that, and lockdown and all that.
I agree. And it's interesting you bring this up, because I just saw the After Death documentary about near-death experiences. And as you said, I shared about my car accident the last time I was on. And 3 weeks ago, I was in the hurricane in Puerto Vallarta. I was on a yoga retreat, and it was evacuated and went through a Category 4 hurricane, and windows blew out and all sorts of things. I wrote about it already on my blog, and we can talk more about it later today if we want to. But what I want to share is, with this eclipse season, we just had the eclipse, the second one yesterday. So the hurricane was the first eclipse 2.5 weeks ago for me. And then this second eclipse, I saw this After Death documentary. And so I share this context to go back to what you said about 2020 and taking care of yourself, because I think that COVID was our near-death experience as a planet.
Mm-hmm.
And what I walked away with after the last 3 weeks, this whole like, wow, here's another like brush with death, right? And then I'm watching this documentary series.
As if you haven't had enough of those. You've had a few.
I've had a few. This is about 2 or 3, I guess now you could say. But here's what I want to say about it. We have a finite amount of energy. There's only so much prana that we have in this life. And what a near-death experience does is it reminds us of that. And it can be very inspiring because you don't want to just spill your prana out all over anymore. And I think that's what happened with COVID also for all of us was I no longer want to spend my energy on things that are meaningless. And I want my life to be meaningful. And I think we've all had that reminder. And now, as we get farther and farther away from that time, the energy starts to dissolve, right? And we start to come back into life. And so I think it's important for us to remind ourselves and ask ourselves, am I spending quality time with my life force? Like, am I doing what I came here to do? And so, March of 2020 for me was, wow, this is what I came here to do. And it's time for me to do it. And, after the hurricane a few weeks ago and, just kind of processing through it, I'm still definitely processing that experience. I had a dream last night about it, about holding the windows closed because of the wind. And like, I'm having some PTSD from it. And it's just another reminder of I'm here to contribute to the planet. We all are. We're all creating on this planet. And am I contributing something of value, something that holds compassion, unconditional love, something that is going to support others? That was what 2020 was for me. And I continue to be reminded of it as though I didn't need another reminder, but I just keep getting these reminders. And the documentary reminds you too, how we have finite energy and time and space here. And while there's other cool places we can be, being here, we get to do something we can't do anywhere else. So
you have this really fascinating episode of Buddhist Biohacker where you featured 2 astrologers. And I think you were looking at the astrology chart for the United States for 2022.
Yeah.
And oh my God, it was so interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have a ton of knowledge. I like to listen to people give astrology forecasts. I love my friend Dina DeCastro, listening to her and her astrology forecasts, but I don't know anything about it, right? But I love saying, okay, what's in the stars for us, But it was so interesting, especially when you're watching that video from the future.
Yeah.
But you can go into that video if you want. But I mean, how does astrology play out in your work too?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, if I had time to study astrology too, I would do it. It's funny. It's in my chart actually to study astrology, but it's a science. I mean, it's a very intense science. So I would say I'm not an astrologer, but I am very passionate about it. And I have certain astrologers that I follow and connect with and really try to stay on top of what's happening because it absolutely influences what's going on. So astrology plays a huge part in my life, to be honest. I mean, my guilty pleasure is to sit and watch astrology videos on YouTube with my favorite astrologers like once a week. So I can really connect in with what's happening with the energy. And then my astrologer is Kate Wind, who was in that video and has been on my show several times. And I connect with her like once a quarter, sometimes more, but to look at my chart and to understand where I'm headed. She's actually the one who told me I was going to have a major experience in Mexico, and I did.
Wow.
So I was prepared for it. And what's interesting is it shows up in my tarot cards. And I wish I could pull up someone's chart and compare them because I'd be the most accurate psychic on the planet probably if I could do that. But I just haven't had the time to invest in that. But I do notice that so reading tarot cards is like trend analysis. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, and I'm a data driven person. And so, yes, there's a mystical side for sure, and my clairvoyance. And yes, I've done it many times before. So I don't want to take the woo woo out of it, but I also want to say there's definitely like a trend. And so I've been reading cards since I was 16, which is like 29 years or something. Yeah, my birthday's coming up. I'm a Scorpio. So
No. Yay, your birthday's coming up.
Yay, my birthday's coming up. I'm 45, which is crazy to think.
Hey, welcome to 45. That's how old I am.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. So yeah, I'm been reading cards a long time. And so I know when I see a certain combination of cards, it means something. Like, it's like, ooh, whenever I see this, like, you know, you're going to sell your house, or whenever I see this, something's going to happen, because it's a trend analysis. And so I'm sharing that to say it totally links to astrology. I've noticed there's certain cards that pop up where I know that something is happening that's astrological. And there's a couple different cards. And I often, if I see that, I will often recommend my client to go to an astrologer, or to go to Kate or whatever, and really look at their chart, because something is happening that's astrological. Because I think we talked about this offline, but what I read as a psychic, I believe, I call it the quantum time fields, which some of you have had near-death experiences have probably seen and experienced. But I look at your timelines, and I'm looking at what you're creating. So I'm not a fatalist. I look at what you're creating. And so what's interesting, Patrick, is I've noticed over the years that certain things show up in my cards and in your timeline in which it notifies me that this is astrological. So there's something happening in your chart that's influencing what's happening, like bigger than just what you're creating. It has something to do with your astrology, which often has to do with your dharma or your life purpose, like what you're here to accomplish. And so I love astrology. It has a big impact on my life. If I could ever, I'm very knowledgeable in it. I think people think psychics are astrologers. So very early on in my practice, like in the early 2000s, people were asking me, well, what does this mean? And what does that mean? So I actually started studying a lot of astrological information simply because clients were asking me questions and I wanted to know the answers. So I've always kept up on it. And then I love it. And I feel responsible to my community to know what's happening, because if there is something like this eclipse, I might want to have a healing circle or a full moon circle, or I do a lot of stuff around the full moon and the new moon. So I try to honor nature's rhythm, which is what astrology is all about. I think it's very connected with nature and our cycles and our rhythms, which links to Ayurveda and shamanism and all those things. So
I think a lot of people mistakenly think the opposite of what you said too. Astrologers are psychic. Like Dina DeCastro was always scolding me saying, astrology is not necessarily predictive. And I have to keep kicking that out of my brain,
You're right. It's not. And there are predictive astrologers, and there are astrologers who just focus on other things. But to me, it's all just lessons. So like, even when you're dealing with something challenging, whether it's astrological or it's like, ooh, here comes the death card, here comes the tower, the collapse, all that stuff. It's more about what are you learning from it? Because we're here in this environment to learn and to experience. I believe we are God's source experiencing life. Like if I were God, I'd be like, hey, I want to experience this and I want to do it in millions of different ways. And that's what we're here doing. We're creating the divine. And so that's what I believe personally. And so I think like with astrology, it's cool to understand your rhythms and it's cool to understand what's coming because you can work with that energy, which is also what I think of the tarot. So like if you go to a psychic and they're reading tarot cards, for me, I'm looking at what you're creating and what you're experiencing. And wow, this energy looks great with a new job. This is a great time to apply for a new job. It's the same thing with astrology. If it's a good time for a new job, then you want to apply for those jobs. So it's kind of learning like what are the energies you're working with so you can use them to your advantage.
You have been talking about tarot, and you and I have talked about being paranormal TV junkies in the past. And I've always considered, tarot to be a tool. And, I wondered if you use any other tools I guess,
Oh,
in
yeah.
your work, whether it be, plug it in, battery operated, or gadget, or even just other Oracle type things. What else do you use in your work?
I've done it all, Patrick. I love it. I love all that stuff. So I do have a crystal ball. It's black rainbow obsidian, actually, like the black scrying mirrors and crystal balls.
I bet it's beautiful.
Oh, I should get it out for you. It's so beautiful. And so I absolutely love my crystal balls. I have used pendulums. I have a pendulum, but I think they're a crapshoot, at least for me. I don't really know that I can get a clear answer from a pendulum. To be honest, it's just not my tool, but I have them because they're really pretty and you want
I think it's too connected to our energy.
It totally is.
Yeah.
It totally is. You have to be so neutral, and it's to me now. If I was using it for a client, maybe, but I don't even do that. So, I definitely read classic Rider-Waite when I read my clients, and it's a very specific Rider-Waite because the colors actually tell you the 5 elements. And so the way that I read the tarot for a client, I absolutely use that. However, I have. I used to have hundreds of decks. I've given so many decks away in the past. I have 3 decks I really like to use for other things. So I have an Osho Zen Tarot, another controversial dude with the HBO series and everything. So, but his cards.
I was going to ask you what those cards were because I heard you mention them in a video, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, the Osho Zen does not pull any punches. It's really good for shadow work. So it's really good to look at, like, what do you need to work on that's blocking you from proceeding forward with whatever you're doing. So I really love those for if you want like a Jungian kind of shadow work experience, the Osho deck is great for that. I do have a shaman oracle by Alberto Villoldos, who's a pretty famous shaman. But I use that deck also for more like looking at like soul work, what your life purpose is, what you're working on energetically, or for somebody who wants more of that shamanic kind of reading. So I have that deck. And then I actually have the David Bowie Tarot, which
Stop it.
Yeah, created by the artist that did a lot of the artwork for Bowie's albums and stuff. So we personally knew Bowie. It is a cool deck.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
The occult wisdom in this deck is insane. So for those of you who have gone super deep into the occult and studying like Hermetics and the Kabbalah and all of that stuff, the Bowie Tarot is pretty epic. I really like it. And honestly, Patrick, it's pretty crazy. I use that for world predictions. The Bowie Tarot is my world prediction deck, and that's primarily when I use it because it really does have a global view of like what's happening in the meanings. So I really like that deck. It's really a lot of stimulation, the art. So clairvoyantly, it's pretty hard to like take in everything clairvoyantly for me because it's overstimulating. It's like a ADD tarot art, but the meanings are really beautiful. So love that. So those are the decks I use. Really good at taking spirit photos. So definitely played with that. I've totally played with the apps that speak to spirits. And yes, sometimes they are accurate and interesting. So I've played with those. I think I've kind of done it all. I've used divining rods before. I think I went through this period like 2007 to like 2012, those 5 years. I pretty much tried everything. I read smoke and I used candles to talk to spirits. I did a mediumship event in New Orleans and they had this giant room with this giant oak table. I mean, this oak table was like, I don't know, hundreds of pounds and table tipped in there. In New Orleans, I mean, it was unbelievable. So I do not use the Ouija board because the energy is so negative, but I love the psychic circle board, which is basically the same concept, but it's very bright colors and the energy frequency is very different. So I love the psychic circle. So yeah, I mean, what a great question. I have done it all. I love it all because I think it's all very interesting. I've burned candles and read the wax. And I mean, you can pretty much play with any of that stuff and have cool things like happen or surface or get messages. I love it all. It's fun stuff.
Was there a time where you ever had fear from any of those tools? And I don't want to equate it to, like your thoughts about the Ouija board, but I think some people are like, "Ooh, I can't believe I'm like, it's just another tool. It's just like a piece of paper or in paranormal investigation, a K2 meter or, a spirit box or whatever."
No, you're right. I don't really have any fear. Here's the thing. There's bad people or negative. It's not even bad. Negative people, just like there's negative spirits. But it's universal law that you're senior in your space. They can't bother you unless you let them. So when I've done like house healings and there's negative entities or spirits, I mean, as long as you go in knowing I'm senior in my space, you can't mess around with me. You can tell them very directly, like, you are not allowed to play with my energy field. So I've never been afraid. I think the only time I get afraid is I still get afraid when I see like shadowy figures. And it sounds so dumb. I'm a medium. I've seen shadowy figures since I was a little kid, and spirits are energy, right? So they manifest through energy. So some spirits have this like magical energy where they're like themselves. It's like I used to work at the mall, and my team knew my gifts, and sometimes I would greet people that weren't there. I'd be like, he would be like, there's no one there, Lisa. And I'm like,
oh, poor Lisa.
So sometimes they show up that way, and that's cool. But when they show up all shadowy and you can just see an outline, it's creepy. And I would wager a guess that most mediums feel the way I feel. So I know it sounds dumb, but that's probably the one thing that scares me, to be honest, because if I'm in my house and I see a shadowy figure walk down my basement steps, that freaks me out. I'm sorry.
I think you're right. I think that would freak most people out. I sometimes feel sorry for those spirits who can only muster that shadow because that's all they can do. And it might be Aunt Martha trying to communicate, but because she's a shadow, we're like, oh, it's the shadow. It's a shadow person.
I know. And it totally scares me still. And I have to use my clairvoyance. Like I have to close my eyes and be like, okay, who is this? And like, see what it is. And then it's okay. But like, that still does.
I bet they still like you. It's okay.
Yes, they do. But that does freak me out. It's like, oh, can you not be so scary?
Well, and I ask for every kind of communication in the world, and I'm always asking for spirits to touch me and all kinds of things. And I always feel like, why are people afraid of that? But I also haven't seen a shadow person. So, if I ever see it, then, it might change my opinion.
But
a
you've
little bit.
seen pictures in your paranormal investigations.
I have. And, I've been.
And it's freaky even in the picture, isn't it?
Yeah. And I've been touched, and I've had a few, there's my infamous hand story that I've talked about a million times. So that has affected me, but seeing doesn't tend to be where I see my evidence. It's a lot of hearing and feeling and things like that. If I have any intuitive ability, it's definitely my eyesight is definitely not going to be one of the strengths. I've got my Mr. Magoo glasses on right now and still struggling. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, the eyesight isn't going to be where it is. So I watched a video you did from a while back, and I believe it was just after you lost a grandmother. And I think you were talking about forgiveness. I think that was kind of one of the lessons you were going with there. And I was so touched by that video. And you also talked about the importance of dreams and journaling. And then I heard you mention in a couple of other videos about journaling as well. And I even saw you in a video like hold up this ginormous stack of just nothing but journals. I was like, shut up. Will you talk a little bit about how those things play a role in your life and in your work?
Yeah, I love this question because I love my dreams. I am a conscious dreamer. So I've had lucid dreams all night for as long as I can remember as a little kid.
Wow.
So I rarely go a night without hours and hours of experiences. And I'm very lucky with that, but I also have done something to cultivate that over time. And so that's where the journaling comes in. So want to recommend a great book called Conscious Dreaming by Robert Moss. It's actually part of my clairvoyant program in my home study program is reading that book because he really talks about how to work with your dreams. And the dream journal is the most important thing you can do. when you acknowledge your dreams, what they're telling you, what they mean, try to understand them, more come, more messages, more dreams, more lucid experiences. It's just been awesome. So for many, many, many years, like through my early 30s, I would say, I had a lot of symbolic and prophetic dreams. So I'd have a lot of symbolic dreams. So like just, I'm working out my emotional state, right, in the dream state. And then I'd have some prophetic dreams and it's a different energy when you have a prophetic dream. And I don't really know how to explain how it's different, but if you've experienced it, it is different. You know that you're dreaming something is going to happen versus dreaming something that you're working out. And with the prophetic dreams to this day, if I dream about somebody, no matter who they are, I actually had a dream about a big YouTuber that I didn't really know. And I still emailed him and told him about my dream. And he wrote me back and was like, holy crap, that's literally what's happening. And I needed this message. And I can't believe you're telling me this dream. And I can tell you offline who that was, but it was really crazy.
Wow.
And so I always will email or text or call, depending on the relationship I have, the person I dream about, because I think it's really important that there's a message coming through me for them. So I honor that, which is why I think I continue to have those kinds of dreams. If it's something about the world, that's a bit tough because there's often things you can't do about it. Like dream about a tsunami. You can't really do anything about that. I also have dreams to share, the Lahaina fire. I lived on Maui. I worked in Lahaina. So that was really tough for me. Again, blog article about it if you want to know my personal feelings about that, but it was really challenging emotionally. But I had dreams for 5 nights in a row where I was helping the deceased cross over. And it doesn't look the way you think it would. It looks like I was in Lahaina and it looked beautiful still. And I helped a grandmother across the street. I helped a man find his keys. I helped all night long, 5 nights in a row. So to me, that's my soul's responsibility. My soul is going to work at that time.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. Do you know Slade Robertson? So I had an episode with Slade probably not long before the last episode that you were on the show. And he talked about how he had, I forget, I'm probably going to get some of the details wrong, but he helped someone from 9/11 crossover in a dream.
Really? Okay. I need to connect with them then.
Yeah. And as soon as you were talking about yours, that just went into my brain because it was a very similar kind of feel from how you described it.
Yep. Well, and it happened in 9/11. I mean, it happened with the tsunami, was a big one in Indonesia for me. I was really, so it's kind of hard to manage because when earth events like that happen that I'm connected to, and it's not everything, I haven't had any dreams about, the war that's happening right now in the Middle East. So it seems like it's certain things. And I don't know why. I don't know the reason why it's certain things. Because I've never been to Indonesia, but for some reason, I was helping in that instance. So it depends, I think, on who needs what and soul connections and God knows. I mean, we're never going to know why that happens, but I did have that happen in 9/11. And so those weeks can be very exhausting because I'm continuing on with life, driving kids to school, all those things. But I've basically been working all night long in the dream state. I also shared this on a video with Kate Wind talking about Scorpio season. And she and her mom shared that in my astrology, I have time traveler in my astrology. And I guess Tyler Henry? That is the
yeah.
He has the same thing too. So I'd love to talk to him if that was even possible, because apparently he has the same lineup I do. But I actually live other lifetimes also in the dream state and consistently. I've been growing up in an alternate reality my whole life. I have 2 other lifetimes I'm living right now, and I don't know how to explain it, but when I go into the dream state, I know exactly where I'm working. I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. And I might live out 3 or 4 months of life in the dream state in one night. And those can be very disorienting because I come back and I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm back.
Do you feel tired then?
Yeah. you feel like groggy, like almost like you get slammed into your body, like, whoa, I'm back in this life. So there's clearly this energy, which is why I think part of why I'm so fascinated with near-death experiences, because it's basically the dream state. I mean, the Tibetan Buddhists, like, and not even the Buddhists, the Tibetan shamans from like the bone tradition, we're talking like before Buddhism was organized, okay? The shamans in Tibet, and there's a book called The Yogas of Dream and Sleep, believe that the goal is to be as awake in life as in the dream state, because your life is the dream. So this is all the dream. And so the practice is to become present and conscious in all states. And I'm definitely in a place, and I practice certain practices for that, by the way. So again, you're cultivating. So the dream journaling, acknowledging your dreams, you're cultivating this practice, because the goal in Tibet, okay, so in Tibet, the goal is that you're conscious when you die, and you are able to make decisions about where you're headed next, right? You're not just caught in this samsara, that cyclic existence where you're just, boop, you get shot back out into this place, right? The goal is to be conscious so you can choose your incarnation. And while that sounds cool, and maybe that'll happen to me, I just think dreams are cool as can be. I had the best dream, and I've never shared this. This happened earlier this year. So my best friend Tracy died of breast cancer in December of 2019. So it was right before COVID. And this is the first person, I mean, I lost some relatives, but this is the first person that like I knew. And I'm a medium, so I didn't know what to expect, right? I don't know what to expect. And I had some dreams about her and could feel her and that kind of thing. Like, but we had some unresolved stuff when she passed away and some things. Well, earlier this year, I had an experience. Oh, it just lights me up. Tracy and I got to spend time together in this interesting place. And it was so real, Patrick. It was so amazing.
And it was the first communication from her?
Yeah. I mean, the first like real communication. And we talked about so much. And it was like this magic. I mean, nothing I've ever experienced. I've had dreams with people who've passed. I've had that stuff, but this was so special. And I woke up so happy. I had so much joy for like weeks. Even now when I talk about it, like it felt like this incredible moment. I just can't describe it. It was so amazing. And like, that is why, like, I can't wait to go to sleep at night usually, because I'm excited about my dream state, and I like it when they're vivid and lucid. And I had a really cool dream where I was initiated by an Indian guru, and it was pretty amazing and intense. It felt really difficult to even be in that vibration with that guru. So I just can't say enough about how important it is to acknowledge your dreams. And if you aren't dreaming or you're having trouble dreaming, don't give up. Like, my husband had a really hard time dreaming, and now he's dreaming. And it really comes down to learning how to access that space, meditating, turn off your devices before you go to bed, like get into that space. But I highly recommend Conscious Dreaming. It's a great book. And if you're not dreaming, that book also is going to help you to start to get into that state and be able to access your dreams. So I can't say enough about dreaming. It is a huge part of my life. And I love that you asked me, Patrick, because no one ever does. And it's probably the biggest part of who I am in all of my life is my dream state.
Well, question.
Yeah.
I struggle to wake up. I am not a morning person. Mm-hmm. And so I've always heard people say, as soon as you have a dream, document it or whatever. Well, when I wake up, there's no cognitive anything going on. There's no chance of me being functional enough to grab a notebook and, write down whatever. And chances are, if I wake up, and even if I don't have a ton of memorable dreams. I will have dreams in phases if I think about them, or if I've read a book about dreams. Like you said, I will have several dreams because it's on my mind and I'm reading about it. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to documenting them, do you literally wake up from the dream, stop what you're doing, turn on the bedside light and write?
Nope.
Do you still remember it later and document it? How does that actual physical process work for you?
Yeah, I've never woken up and just wrote stuff down. I rarely actually ever write anything down these days. Here's what I do. So when I wake up from the night, because here's the thing, you can wake up plenty other times from dreams in the middle of the night, you go back to sleep.
Right. And that's my problem. And then bloop, it's gone.
So I just try to make a mental note of the symbol in the dream. That usually brings it back. So let's say out of the whole dream, there was a shark, I try to say that 3 times in my head. And then if I fall back asleep, then in the morning, usually I can remember, okay, I need to look up shark. And sometimes you can bring the memory back. In that book, Conscious Dreaming, Robert Moss shares a mantra. I'm pretty sure it's Oma Gama. But when you wake up in the morning and you're still halfway in that state, you can chant this mantra and it actually brings the dream back. That does work. But to be honest, I take what I remember. So I take the symbols and I'll look them up in my dream dictionary and I'll write about it later. Sometimes they're so profound and lucid, you remember them. You're like, I remember this happened last night in my dream state. I've never gotten up and immediately write in a dream journal. My dream journal is in conjunction with my regular journal. I journal a lot. So I have an ongoing journal and it's kind of everything. So what I try to do is look up the symbols that were in the dream, and then I'll do some journaling. If it's symbolic, if it's prophetic, I'll write it down. I haven't done it this last year because I've been on a hiatus, but I will start this up again starting this month. I do share some of my big dreams with my community. If I have dreams about the world or dreams that had a profound message or something, I absolutely share it with my community because I think, we're getting that information for a reason and it's worth sharing. There's a few dreams on my blog that I shared in the past. But yeah, I don't do it right away. I just try to remember what I remember and journal about that later. So you can certainly do that, but I don't know that you have to cultivate the dream state.
Have you heard about the hue technique?
No.
So this was, oh God, I'm clicking on the link now. Who knows what? Oh man, it doesn't open up. Yeah, I knew it was potentially not going to open up, but I blogged about it because I found a few articles about, they call it the hue technique and it's HU, but it's pronounced hue, HUE.
Okay.
And it's for remembering your dreams. And I remember I tried it and it immediately worked.
Wow, that's cool.
I am famous for trying a million things and then giving up and not doing anything. I've tried astral projection and meditation and all channeling, and I don't have the patience to go past 3 days and then I'm done with it. But That's one thing I tried. And I remember that next day going, shut up, this goofy little trick thing. It's about holding it out and the shape of your mouth and hue and doing it right as you're falling asleep or something. And I don't know if it's just that you're thinking about dreaming and hue is just accidental. You just happen to be saying it. It was weird, but I had a dream, a big dream that I remembered. And I'm going to have to look. I think I probably blogged about the dream I had after I did it. But anyway, you'll have to look that up. I don't know if that's still a thing. And it might just be somebody's blog post that 5 people read, 15 years ago and nobody knows about it. Who knows? I don't know if it was ever a big thing.
Well, that's interesting. I want to try it now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you don't need to.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, but still, you never know what will come from it. I think that's interesting. I like trying all sorts of stuff. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, speaking of mantras, the last time you were here, you had the Dalai Lama in your bio then too. And I didn't ask about it. Who doesn't ask about someone working with the Dalai Lama? So please share.
Well, they say that your guru appears when you're ready. And in 2009, I was deep into my meditation practice. I had really was just, I opened my psychic business or practice, or whatever you want to call it, in 2006. And I'd been reading people for 3 years, and I was very passionate, and still am to this day, about learning and developing my own gifts so I can continue to be the best that I can be. And also, I want to continue to learn, right? You want to keep opening up everything you're learning, at least for me. And so I was like deep into meditation. I was reading all these books, just like you. I was doing astral projection stuff. I was listening to brain waves, like all these things. Very excited about all of this stuff. And one day, it was in the evening, I was doing a meditation in my apartment. And all of a sudden, I was in a gold and red room. And I'll never forget it. It was like this bright gold room with this red carpet. And in front of me at the end of the carpet was the Dalai Lama. I knew it was the Dalai Lama because he's a public figure, and you're going to know if you're looking at the Dalai Lama, for all of us, but I didn't know anything about him or Buddhism or anything. So I didn't really know what to do. And in this vision, in the meditation, I walked up to him and I bowed. I was like, I don't know what to do. Do I bow? Do I kneel? What do I do? I don't know. And he looked at me.
Is there a secret handshake?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know what to do. And he looked at me and he pointed and he said, I am waiting for you. And out I popped from this meditation, eyes wide open, sitting up in my bedroom. And I was like, what the heck was that? So what happened, and this is in my second book that's going to come out in spring of next year, because I'm sharing my 7 years that I followed His Holiness around at all these events. But what happened next is I had a yoga teacher in the Bahamas and asked what I should do about this vision. And she suggested that I create an intention to meet the Dalai Lama, which seemed pretty crazy to me, but I was like, okay. So I created an intention. I just wrote it on a piece of paper. I put it on my altar with all of my stuff I had everywhere. Well, about 3 days later, I was working, I was still doing readings, but I was also working in retail. So I was coming home from work. I opened up my mailbox and there was a letter from the office of the Dalai Lama. And I thought, what the heck is this? Never have I gotten anything like that. I open it up and it's a solicitation to support Tibet. And this was 2009. Yeah. January of 2009, or maybe it was a little bit later. So anyway, there was some little prayer flags, and I opened up the letter. I hung the prayer flags with my intention, on my altar. And I noticed on the letter, there was a website, and you guys, this was 2009. I had a desktop computer, turn on the, getting on the internet. This was old school. I got on his website and I saw that he was going to be doing a public talk in Berkeley in California in 4 days. And I was like, I bought a ticket. It was $20. Bought a ticket on Craigslist. I'm like, I don't know how I can go. Well, I ended up having just enough readings booked unexpectedly to buy a plane ticket. I had a friend of mine that wanted to go with me to split the hotel room. And 7 days after this vision, I was on an airplane flying to California to see the Dalai Lama speak. And I saw him speak in Berkeley, California in 2009. And after that, I basically went to an event every year over 7 years. The second event I went to was at Radio City Music Hall. And that particular event was a 3-day teaching because I wanted to learn about Buddhism. On the third day, so crazy, we broke for lunch. And I had been going to Rockefeller Center, the mall there, to eat lunch, on the breaks. And on this day, I thought, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go a different way. So I went around a corner and I literally ran into a giant man who was Secret Service. And I look up and there's His Holiness and he waves at me and I wave at him. And I'm like, oh my God, I just literally waved at the Dalai Lama. We were 10 feet away. I have the picture, by the way. I have a picture of this. Took a photo. Secret Service let me. And I went back in on that third day and the Dalai Lama said, hey, after lunch, I decided whoever wants to become a Buddhist, I'll just do your vows right now. I was like, what? And they say when a guru speaks to thousands of people, they're also speaking to you directly. And I understand that because I knew he was speaking to me. I knew that I had run into him in the street and that I was going to become a Buddhist that day. So I took the Buddhist vows with the Dalai Lama. And then we also took the Bodhisattva vows if we wanted to, and not everyone did. And the Bodhisattva vow is essentially you agree to incarnate on the planet Earth for 3 eons until all sentient beings have become enlightened. And so I'm sure I've taken this vow before, and I've said it many times passionately on many shows and teaching events that I will continue to come back and be here and support everyone until we find world peace, until we're all awakened. And so that vow is really important. I still recite it every month and have since 2009. It's very important to me. And one of the phrases from that vow is, may I be a bridge, a boat, and a ship for all who wish to cross the water. And I just love that so much. And that's a huge part of my work and who I am. I went from there to, I signed up for 2 weeks in 2011 to be a volunteer for the Kala Chakra for World Peace in Washington, D.C. And that was equivalent to another near-death experience in that it was completely life-changing. I was so naive to the world, and I learned so much, like about politics, about Tibet, about, what was happening in the world. There were so many activists at the Kala Chakra. I worked for TIPA, the Tibetan Institute for Performing Arts, and I sold tickets for them, and they were so kind. Like at the end of the 2 weeks, there was the Milarepa is like a Tibetan opera, and the Tibetans pulled me aside and said, you've worked so hard for us and we want you to see the Milarepa. So I got to sit and watch the Milarepa, and I remember crying because Tibetan music is very eerie. It's very alien feeling. It feels out of world. It's not a normal sound. Like the guttural chanting, the way they sing, the music.
To our culture anyway.
Yeah, to our culture. It's very strange. And it felt like I was home. I felt home more than I have ever felt in my life. And on the last day of this event, which I was there 2 weeks, the event was 10 days. There was an initiation at the end. And on the last day, His Holiness gave the volunteers an audience with him. So I was with 50 other people and they took a photo with him. I was actually pressed up against his robes, like on the bleachers. So I was like pressed up against him. I have that photo too. And I was like, I can't believe I'm touching the Dalai Lama. But I have written about all of this in my second book, which will be coming out next year. But when he walked into the room, everything exploded. There was no time. There was no space. The room didn't exist. There was nothing but my guru. And I can't really explain to anyone how that feels unless you've been in the presence of a guru. But regardless of any controversy around His Holiness, I know what I felt that day. And it was profound consciousness, nothing like I've ever experienced in my life. And so that was when I met him officially. And then I did do another couple of events, but in 2016, to kind of cut forward, in 2016, I was one of 3 women selected to be the volunteer coordinators for the 400 volunteers in the effort to bring His Holiness to Boulder, Colorado. And so he came in 2016 to Boulder, and that was like a 2-year project because he was going to come and it got rescheduled, and there was a lot of work involved with the Tibetan people and the city of Boulder and security and all this stuff that went into it. So I learned a lot. It was pretty intense. But in 2016, I knew it was my final event with him. I knew he wasn't going to travel anymore. I knew intuitively that the energy was complete. And so it was tough. They invited the 3 of us women to come to a private audience with His Holiness and the Tibetan people. And I have photos of that too. And so we got to sit in the front row in front of the Dalai Lama while he addressed his own people. And he's like their dad. I mean, he was talking to them about education and all these things. And the thing that really stuck out to me, he spoke in Tibetan. So his translator communicated to the 3 of us women, which was also special because his translator is tons of Shakti for him too. But the thing that stuck out to me in 2016 with that message to his people was the Dalai Lama said, I have all of these lamas in Dharamsala who are just chanting and chanting. And he's like, chanting does nothing unless you understand the nature of reality and how the mind works. And he expressed the importance of us continuing to learn and to educate ourselves in science and technology and natural law and how the world works. And I found that to be really profound because he wasn't asking people to pray or chant or believe in something. He was asking us to learn. And I think that I've always been an avid learner. And, you know, the message to me the day that we took the photo in 2011 was, he said, you need to go back to school. That's what he said to me. And so for me, the Dalai Lama, I followed him for 7 years. All of my initiations are by His Holiness. And I believe that those initiations are about compassion and education. And that's what I take away from it. I don't go to a Buddhist temple. I have the practices that he taught that I cultivate on a daily basis. And a lot of it has to do with compassion, unconditional love, releasing judgment and anger. And that's really hard because we all have judgments. I definitely do. And it's a daily practice to forgive, to release judgment, to allow everyone to have their own experience and to not try to shut people down. And so I'm really glad you asked me also about this, because I haven't talked about it very much. And it became really clear to me that it was something I need to start talking about. And here we are, and you're the first person asking me about it. So the energy is right for me to share my story, because it changed my life. Like, the Dalai Lama has changed my life. Absolutely. And he has solidified for me what my work is, which is the Divine Mother, you know, the bodhicitta, the compassion and loving kindness that we need to show one another every day.
Well, I'm glad you shared. And I just want you to know that so much of what you talked about is such a foreign, you know, thoughts in my head that I'm still stuck on Dalai Lama at Radio City Music Hall. That's this you know, gay Broadway loving podcasters going, what? Radio City Music Hall, the Dalai Lama? What?
Yeah. And Richard Gere was there and everything.
Wow.
It's like a big deal. And you know, it's a weird talk about foreign. I'm with you, Patrick. It is a weird world. Like, going through security and the chanting and people prostrating, and like, it is not anything. I am an Irish Catholic girl who grew up in rural Iowa and lives in Colorado. Like, even my parents were like, you're doing what? Like, no one understood what I was doing. And I am writing about it because I'm trying to understand what I was doing. Why am I drawn to like the Dalai Lama and yoga and Ayurveda? And I'm not a yogi, flexible. No, I'm not. And that's not what I teach. What I teach is alignment. And because we're so out of alignment with everything, our spirituality, our emotions, our physical body. And so for me, my whole focus is on alignment of ourselves and doing it compassionately rather than self-loathing. Like, it's easy to beat ourselves up, you know? It's easy to beat ourselves up and say, I'm not good enough. I didn't do this enough. Listen, I just did a yoga retreat and I was about 30 pounds heavier than everybody else there. I'm not flexible. It was very challenging for me to do that retreat. And it's humbling as all get out, because you are not an expert in that. I am not. And so that's the energy and the space that I want to hold for everyone, is like, I don't know why I have these Tibetan shamanic passions of the elements and nature and the cycles of nature. And it links to everything, astrology and yoga and Ayurveda and psychic. I mean, in Buddhism, it's called the siddhis, right? It's the spiritual, supernatural powers, right? Is the psychic gifts. It's all talked about in all of these things. Why I'm into it, I have no idea. And I may never know, but I love all of it. And I love learning about it. And I really love supporting other people who want to learn about it too.
Well, I am glad that you are brave enough to come to our, nerdy show here and share all of these things. And I want to thank you for doing that. And I want to give you however much space you need to pull your final thoughts together, I guess. And also tell us about this second edition of the book, which, by the way, I'm going to put in the show notes our last conversation, because if people are interested in this book, they also need to go back to the last, episode 176. And, you'll hear more about Enlightenment Pie. But give us your final thoughts and where to find you and more about that update.
Oh, I love it. So here's what I would say. My revised edition of Enlightenment Pie is a process for natural healing. It is not a cure. It is not a diet. It is not anything like that. It is really a lot of self-inquiry, and it teaches the crust or the foundation of your practice, which is meditation, contemplation, self-inquiry, and journaling. So the book is really teaching you how to create a spiritual practice foundation, and then how to build on that with your health, what you eat. I introduce food frequency as a concept, which I'm going to be doing a lot with my culinary background, with cooking classes around food frequency. And the other thing that I'm really proud of with part of why I revised it is because the revised edition is a multimedia experience. So there's actually QR codes that link you to my mobile app. So I have a home study application with there's a year's worth of courses in there. I also have community events. There's community chat, which is uncensored. It's really a safe place for you to learn and explore. And also I have live classes online for yoga, block therapy. All of it is gentle and beginner, by the way. You can take it to an intense place if you want, but it's not, none of it should be anyways overwhelming or feel not accessible. It's a very accessible space. So really, that's what my book is, and that's what my work is today. So the home study application is my community, and I am really excited to share. The thing I will plug today is next year, we're starting January 1st with a year of personal transformation. It's only $33 a month, and I am going to take you through my book for the whole year. So we're actually going to use all of the tools in the book. You're going to learn. It's going to be linked to courses and video content and my own personal engagement for the entire year to be able to transform your health and your wellness and your spirituality. And I'm pretty excited about that. I've made it as accessible as possible from a price point place because it's not really the point. It's really about you being in a sacred container, which is my community space that's safe to heal from your trauma and to support you in whatever your goals are. Because Enlightenment Pie can help with weight loss. It can help with candida, mold, parasites. But the bigger picture is it's about loving yourself and putting your own self-care first. And so that's what it's about. So that's my work today. Yoga, Ayurveda, readings, all those things also on my website. So there's plenty of stuff, but I'm most proud of what I've built because honestly, you guys, it's taken me five years to build this and really 15 since I started writing the book. So it's been quite an evolution to get to the place that it's at today. And my final words, I think, are just a real thank you, Patrick, for having me on. I'm very grateful to be connected to you. I love your energy, and I think we can have so much fun talking about so many different things. So thank you for giving me space to talk about what's important to me. And the questions you asked me are all the things that are really important to me that I haven't really talked about. So I'm really excited to be able to share more about myself and less about the performance that a psychic does, right? The readings and the predictions and all that stuff is the performance. Like, it is real. It's also, there's an expectation with it. And I think there's so much more to me than that. So thank you for asking the questions you did today.
You rock!
Oh my gosh, so do you. So do you. One day we're going to do an investigation together. I think that would be fun.
Well, actually, have you been back to the Addie house?
I have not, but it's interesting you asked me that because it's definitely on my list. It's on my list for sure.
I had forgotten all about that part of our conversation. I was listening to it yesterday and I was like,
did I ever share the photo? I need to get that.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time. Thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/bigseance. Jennifer Scanlon, Michael Henson, Daryl, Anne-Marie Sullivan, Natalie N., Kim Robb, Joe C.L. Lorenzo, and Susan Davey. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/parlorguests, are Anne Rekovich from ozparatech.com, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Janae Michaels from Grey House Tarot and Farm Artifacts, Amy Park Gedicke of amyparkg.com, Lonnie Scott from weirdwebradio.com, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, Midge Munster from midgemunster.com, Heather N. of dancingbeealchemy.com, Diane Razmataz, Tracy King, Andrew Watson, Amy Taylor, Christine Rath Selhi, Mindy Kintop, Hope Battaglia, Cass and Bailey, Melissa Armour, Janet Shaw Binns, Bruce Williams, and Christopher Kohler. And I currently have 2 awesome listeners who support the show at the $10 level, which isn't even a thing. Those awesome paranerds are Glenna Becker and James Wilfong. I also have 3 awesome listeners who support the show at the completely made up $20 level. And those awesome peeps are Norman and Linda Keller and Kevin Gilbert. Thank you, paranerds.